What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, November 30th, 2017. And as you can tell, we're back on with high-quality sound and BAM user video and all the rest of it. And Dan and Mike and John just put in a huge amount of work. We were up very early this morning working out an alternative solution. Spectrum is still slow out here, but at this point, it looks like the problem really was Skype and their new desktop version just really... It's junk, and we're not going to use that any longer, and we've got something else going on here. All right, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And getting on into the news here, there's a lot of stuff going on here. The big news is that Rex Tillerson is apparently leaving the administration. They're saying it's going to happen sometime in January. He's going to step down as Secretary of State and be replaced by Mike Pompeo. And then Mike Pompeo, in turn, will be replaced as head of the CIA by Senator Tom Cotton. And I think that's going to be an improvement. I don't know why Pompeo's going to do as Secretary of State. He's been caught lying before Congress so many times. But obviously a major shakeup, and obviously the end result of the fact that Tillerson and Trump weren't exactly working smoothly together. So that's where we are with that. Now, Representative John Conyers supposedly has been hospitalized, suffering from the stress and the tension related to the ongoing scandal. And it reads to me like a pitiful bid for sympathy, and it's not really working because Nancy Pelosi, who just weeks ago was defending him and calling him an icon, came on out and said it's time for him to resign and step on down. So a lot of things happening over there. Meanwhile, getting on back to the real scandals that nobody wants to talk about, Russiagate, Primary-gate, Dossier-gate, Uranium-gate, whatever, all the gates that are over there. Basically, a lawyer for former DNC IT staffer Imran Awan is scrambling to block evidence found on a hidden laptop which may contain proof of a massive spy ring operating at the highest levels of Congress in what may be the largest breach of national security in U.S. history. So apparently it is huge, and the lawyer is just trying to find some way to block the evidence on the laptop that ties into Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Now, you remember my pet theory about Hillary and her private email server? Going on back to 1994, the Chinagate scandal. Then President Bill Clinton, as he was running for re-election, used his authority as president to authorize the sale to China of militarily sensitive technology, and Chinese money was pouring into his re-election campaign using Chinese American citizens to make it all seem like it was legal. But when the investigation got going, it turned out the money was coming from Chinese billionaires and even Chinese intelligence. And they should have fully investigated back then, but the Clintons have this amazing ability to just walk away from these things. And apparently the reason they dropped the investigation was the White House email server crashed and there weren't any backup tapes. Golly gee whiz, we have no evidence to work with. How many times have we heard that one before? Speaking of somebody else who seems to have grown a coat of Teflon, apparently Jeff Epstein's trial, he's facing a civil trial over his dalliances with underage girls, was supposed to get underway next week. But apparently his attorney, Bradley Edwards, Bradley Edwards is the lawyer for the civil lawsuit. It's been dragging on for 8 years. And basically, Palm Beach County Circuit Judge Donald Hefele agreed to delay the trial until March. So they're putting that off because that's yet another scandal. Remember all the talk coming out about how there's a former member of the White House staff is getting ready to blow the whistle on all the times Bill and Hillary flew that Lolita Express down to Epstein's little pleasure palace down in the Caribbean. A lot of blackmail going on back and forth. That may be the only thing still holding the government together in a cohesive form is all the mutual blackmail. Now, Clinton accusers Juanita Broaddrick and Kathleen Willey stormed Al Franken's office demanding that he step down, that he resign over these multiple sexual harassment allegations against him. And again, we don't want to jump to conclusions. An allegation is not proof, but in Al Franken's case, there was that photo. And it does seem to have tripped off this firestorm, and it's making people in Congress look like real slime balls, people in the corporate media looking like real slime balls. And I think the American people are waking up to a new understanding of how the elites in our society really behave when they think nobody is looking. Now, we're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining the network. Apparently, Matt Lauer came on out with a statement saying that some of the accusations against him have been mischaracterized or exaggerated, but then he turned around and said, yeah, he actually did some of it. And now there's this NBC staffer, married NBC staffer, claiming that Matt Lauer abused her sexually in his office, claims he had a little button on his desk that would lock the door. And I don't know, is it the ego, the power, or is it the fact that 9 times out of 10 when people in these positions proposition a woman, they're going to get a positive result? And that intermittent reinforcement is going to keep them behaving that way. It's the same principle behind Las Vegas. You know you're going to lose, but every time you win, you get that thrill. That's the intermittent reinforcement of the conditioned behavior. So there's the psychiatric dimension to all of this. Now, Ann Curry is speaking out in the wake of Matt Lauer's ouster from NBC, saying women need to thrive without fear. Well, a black belt in martial arts is going to help. Pepper spray, if that doesn't work, get a gun. I remember back during the militant feminist movement of the 1990s, rather than empowering women, teaching them to take care of themselves, to fend off attackers, they turned them into a new victim class. Oh, they were all afraid there was a rape epidemic, which, by the way, there wasn't, but that was what everybody was selling with their books and conferences and the rest of it. So I don't have a problem with women living without fear. I think everybody should live without fear. But in this day and age, that means you know how to take care of yourself, because the perversity of the universe tends toward a maximum. The universe bites. Buy a helmet. Don't sit there and wait for somebody on TV or in a politician's office to say, we will protect you, because it never really happens. Look at the out-of-control cybercrime epidemic all over the country as an indication of just how poorly you are being protected. We'll have more about cybercrime a little bit later in the show. Now, let's get on down to Judge Roy Moore. He is still leading in the polls. His lead is growing. And it looks like the people of Alabama are basically understanding this smear campaign was exactly that. But his opponents are not giving up. And apparently the Associated Press ran a story that claimed Steve Bannon, Trump's ally and Breitbart News chairman, was distancing himself from the Roy Moore campaign in Alabama. And the AP piece came on out, where's Bannon? Moore booster absent in Alabama. And the story was distributed all over the AP wire service, and it ran all over the country. And it turned out everything was untrue. It was a complete fiction. And the Associated Press has now retracted the article. And I'm sure they're already busy coming up with something else they can put on out there and say, well, Moore tap dances barefoot on shag carpeting, and he passes wind in hall closets, and anything else they can think of. But at this point, the corporate media has shredded its own credibility. There's no question about that. This could even be a watershed moment which sees the beginning of the final decline of corporate media, because their inability to get Roy Moore destroyed with this smear campaign sends a clear message. The corporate media is no longer able to control what Americans are thinking, and that's what they're paid to do. And if they can't do that job anymore, their corporate masters are going to start putting away those checkbooks, and all those talking heads on the corporate media, they're going to have to start learning to live on a middle-class salary and maybe not be quite so frisky with the intern pool. So let's get on over to the war zones, as it were. China is getting ready to deploy their elite troops in Syria to fight alongside Assad's army. And this is coming from multiple reports in Middle East regional sources. China is sending elite military units to Syria to advise and assist the Syrian army in an attempt to root out the country's terrorist insurgency, especially Chinese Islamist foreign fighters who've shown up in increasing numbers. Apparently, the U.S. government is trying to drag in ISIS from the rest of the world anywhere they can to keep this thing going. Now, if this turns out to be true, this is the first time China has sent assistance to the Assad government. But there may be something else going on. The reality is ISIS is all but eradicated. They've lost all their strongholds. They've lost all the towns they were in control with. They're reduced down to these roving bands wandering around the Euphrates area and dodging bullets. So China may be, I say maybe, stepping in to help Syria prepare for a possible renewed U.S. effort to oust Bashar al-Assad. Because everybody understands that was always the U.S. agenda. In the early years of the Syria war, they admitted it. Yes, we have to get rid of the evil Assad. He's gassing his own people. He's keeping his library books way overdue. He's a horrible monster. And then because the American people were getting sick of wars, they changed it around and said, well, we're not really in Syria to make war on the Syrian people. We're there to get ISIS and al-Qaeda. And then every time the U.S. flew into Syria, they would miss ISIS and al-Qaeda and bomb important Syrian infrastructure. Then we find out that President Obama and then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton were actually smuggling arms and supplies to ISIS and al-Qaeda in Syria. At the same time, we were being told ISIS were these horrible monsters that needed eradicating. It's part of the war on terror. And, of course, giving aid and company to the enemy, aid and comfort, rather, to the enemy in a time of war, that's the technical definition of treason. Now, Iran, all of a sudden, is starting to flex their military muscles, symbolically, but they're planning on sending some of their warships for visits to Italy, Spain, Algeria, and even the Gulf of Mexico. And I think that latter one may have been a little reckless. Now, legally, technically, much of the Gulf of Mexico is considered international waters. And Iran and anybody else has a perfect legal right to go there. But I'm sure the U.S. propagandists are going to seize on this saying, Iran is being provocative. They're sailing their ships off our coast. Well, how long has the U.S. government been sailing our warships off their coast? A little bit of perspective there. Now, there's a new development over in Iraq, and that is that in an interview with Press TV, Hajj al-Amiri, who heads Iraq's Badr organization, is saying that the popular forces are calling on the Iraq parliament to draw up legislation to demand the U.S. pull out all their troops from the Arab country. The war is, at least in theory, long over, but the U.S. is garrisoning Iraq to keep exerting control over it, and the Iraqis really don't want to have that happen any longer. And absent a state of war, absent a declared war, absent a UN Security Council resolution, the United States has no more legal right to be in Iraq than they do in Syria. Now, yesterday we were talking about how part of the propaganda to sell people on a war is to demonize the enemy leader, make him sound horrible, that they do terrible, terrible things, that they're a bad person, and that's why they deserve to die. And they certainly did it with Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. And the reality is, Gaddafi was trying to be a good ruler for his people. Under Gaddafi in Libya, a home is considered a natural human right. There are no homeless, or there weren't under Gaddafi. Today it's a different story entirely. Under Gaddafi, education and medical treatment were all free. Contrast that with the high cost of education and medical care in this country. And it's not like they're all that different in terms of quality. Now, something that Gaddafi did that a lot of people admired is he built the largest irrigation system in the world. They were calling it the Great Man-Made River, and it basically, funded by the Gaddafi government, designed to make water readily available to all Libyans across the entire country. They were greening up the country. They were starting agriculture in formerly arid areas. They were building up their infrastructure, not their war machine. And along with that, with the new abundance of farmland, any Libyan who wanted to start a farm, they were given a house, farmland, livestock, and seeds, all free of charge. Does this sound like an evil leader? When a Libyan woman gave birth, she was given $5,000 for herself and the child to get a good start, make sure the baby had everything that they need. Electricity was free in Libya. No electric bills. Gasoline was 14 cents per liter. And most importantly, and I think this is very telling, Gaddafi raised the level of education. When Gaddafi took power, only 25% of Libyans were literate. And he brought it up to 87%, with 25% of students earning university degrees. Now, these next two are really the reason why Libya had to be destroyed and Gaddafi had to be killed. Libya had a state bank, not a private central bank, a state bank, and it provided loans to citizens at 0% interest by law. And Libya had no external debt. They did not owe their wealth to the Federal Reserve or the ECB or any of that. And finally, of course, there was the gold dinar, where Gaddafi came out with a gold-backed currency and said, if you want to buy Libya's oil from now on, you will pay for it with the gold dinar. That was going to stimulate trade with his country. And the rest of Africa were looking at the gold dinar and saying, that's a stable currency. Let's start using that. Let's drop the dollar and go with that. And that's the real reason for the war on Libya. Had nothing to do with Gaddafi being a bad guy. It was all about protecting the wealth and power of the private central banks, especially the Federal Reserve. All wars are bankers' wars. There's an article under that title at the top of the main page. If you haven't read it, you probably should take a look. Now, getting on over to Korea, things are getting very, very intense over there. The U.S. is warning that the North Korean leadership will be utterly destroyed in case of war. So there's a little bit of chest thumping going on, telegraphing a decapitation strike. But I think North Korea has succeeded in becoming a credible nuclear power with a credible nuclear deterrent, and that changes the equation dramatically. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. So we're talking about North Korea, and everybody's in a lather because North Korea tested a ballistic missile with a far greater range than any they have demonstrated before, and it is something that can hit the U.S. mainland. Now, at this point, the reality is that North Korea has probably dispersed all of the missiles that they've got. They've got lots and lots of tunnels. They've been digging through the mountains to house their conventional artillery. They could be used to hide missiles or warheads. So the idea that the U.S. can go on in and do a decapitation strike does not prevent a retaliation. And that's what makes the deterrent credible. It would be very, very risky to try that. The only way the U.S. could attack North Korea now and guarantee there was no retaliation is to literally nuke the entire country. And even with all the nuclear warheads the United States has, they can't quite get all of North Korea melted down to where the tunnels and storage places would be destroyed. But they're out there talking this tough talk. And they're starting to get pushback from the rest of the world. Russia has rejected a U.S. call to cut ties with North Korea. And Russia is basically saying North Korea has every right to test missiles, just like any other country. Russia recently tested one. The U.S. tests missiles all the time. They're trying to make a big deal out of the fact that North Korea is building up a defensive deterrent capability. Now, apparently, Donald Trump, in talking with Xi Jinping, is saying the U.S. is going to impose even more sanctions on North Korea. And we're not sure what that's going to be. They're trying to get China to cut off oil to North Korea, but that's going to harm China's already fragile economy. China and North Korea are trading partners. It's going to be very hard to get them to go along with this. And the reality is that while North Korea does trade with some countries like China, because of the isolation they've been in for so long, they're actually quite self-sufficient. They're not hopelessly entangled up with the global economy. So, moving on down here, here's an interesting article, and I hope this guy's right. It's over in newsantiwar.com. And basically it's saying North Korea's nuclear power declaration could be a prelude to talks, meaning now that North Korea has established itself as a nuclear power with a nuclear deterrent, maybe now they're willing to talk because they'll be negotiating from a position of parity with the United States. And again, North Korea has as much right to a deterrent as any other nation. And looking over the last 16 years of wars, there is this clear pattern of pressuring or otherwise convincing nations to give up weapons of mass destruction, immediately followed by a U.S. invasion. And North Korea is smart enough to see that that is the pattern. So they've got absolutely no reason to give up that deterrent because that's what's going to keep them peaceful. That was certainly the reason given to our generation for the huge nuclear arsenal built by the United States and even by Russia. Mutually assured destruction means nobody's going to push the button, although we came dangerously close during the Cuban Missile Crisis. But I think Kim Jong-un, he gambled. It was a dangerous gamble, but I think he's won. I think he's won. Okay, now, apparently the former Egyptian premier, Ahmed Shafiq, is complaining that the United Arab Emirates is preventing him from traveling to his country. He wants to run in Egypt's presidential elections next year, but apparently the UAE is forbidding him to leave the country. So that's going to probably develop into a sticky diplomatic situation. Going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Oh, wait, they changed the clock on me. I keep forgetting that. Anyway, another development in Egypt. Russia has negotiated a deal for its warplanes to use Egypt bases. This is going to allow Moscow to project more power and influence across North Africa and the Middle East. And once again, Israel is bombing the Gaza Strip. They're claiming the justification was... Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Getting on back to Israel. Yesterday, we reported that the Knesset apparently has passed this law which says members of the Knesset or the Prime Minister are now above the law, cannot be investigated for corruption. And apparently, they're now looking at a legal way to declare Jews-only communities. And this is reported in the Jerusalem Post. And so this nation-state of the Jewish people is currently being shaped by Knesset committee ahead of expected efforts by Netanyahu's coalition to pass it into law. And one article of the legislation says that every resident of Israel, without difference of religion and nationality, has a right to act to preserve his culture, heritage, language, and identity, and that a religious or national community has the right to establish a separate communal town. Well, I find this rather hypocritical because the rest of the world is being told that they must accept open borders, multiculturalism, blended societies, uncontrolled migration, that we have to accept each other's foibles of behavior like rape and crime. But Israel wants to have Jews-only communities. Can you say apartheid? I knew you could. Apparently, Trump is going to announce the move of the American embassy to Jerusalem, possibly as soon as next week. And this has been a big issue for a long time. Israel wants to claim Jerusalem as their capital city. The capital of Israel is actually Tel Aviv. And when the United Nations crafted that partition plan, they declared Jerusalem had to be a shared city between Jews, Christians, Muslims, and the Orthodox community. And, of course, Israel wants it all. And bit by bit, they're trying to annex or take over or simply buy East Jerusalem, which is supposed to be the Muslim section, and the future capital of a Palestinian state. But by moving the American embassy to Jerusalem, Trump is basically sanctioning a view that Jerusalem really is the capital of Israel. So, little disappointed on that one there. There's a new draft law sponsored by members of Netanyahu's coalition that would see activists who promote the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement face criminal charges and jail time. Now, a boycott is a recognized form of peaceful protest. Here in the United States, it's protected under the First Amendment. But apparently the boycott is having a huge success, and that's why they want to criminalize it everywhere, including here in the United States of America. There have been efforts to try and bring pressure to bear on companies and individuals to not support the boycott and divestment sanctions movement, because Israel's missing all that money that is now going someplace else. But again, a boycott is an internationally recognized form of peaceful, nonviolent protest. Now, Israeli forces have forced Palestinian farmers off lands they were working on in the Jordan Valley area of the Tubas district in the northern occupied West Bank. This is coming from Palestinian media. And apparently the Israeli forces ordered a group of Palestinian farmers near the village of Sakhout to stop working and leave the lands immediately. Now, the Jordan Valley forms a third of the occupied West Bank, with 88% of its land already under full Israeli military control. 57% of the land in the valley has been declared closed military zones, where Israeli forces routinely train with live ammunition and explosive devices. And now they've decided to confiscate thousands of square meters of private Palestinian lands in the northern West Bank. And what's really interesting is Israel actually violates their own law and international law, because under international law, governments are allowed to commandeer private property for military purposes. But when the military need no longer exists, the land is supposed to be given back to its original owners. Now, in the case of Israel, they'll declare a section of land, a military zone, a buffer zone, and they'll go on in and play with it for a while. And then when they no longer feel they need it, it's turned over for private development to Israeli businessmen. So it's just another way they're trying to chip away at Palestine, bit by bit by bit. The rest of the world does seem to be waking up to what's really going on the ground in Israel and Palestine. And apparently, women MPs from an Algerian parliamentary delegation walked out of an international conference just as members of the Israeli Knesset were about to speak. A little taste of their own medicine. Because if you'll remember past UN meetings, every time the representative from Iran gets up to speak, the Israeli ambassador will just storm out in a huff of indignation. Now, the Saudis have intercepted another ballistic missile fired from Yemen, and this is in the southern city of Khamis Mushayit in the southern western province of Asir. And I'm sure that the corporate media will be screaming that Iran was behind this, Iran gave them the missile. But as was the case with the last one, this is a missile designed and built entirely within Yemen, and Iran has got nothing to do with it. You have to hand it to the Yemeni people. They're facing a tremendously better equipped military from Saudi Arabia, but they seem to keep out-soldiering them. This war has gone on much longer than bin Salman expected, or for that matter, the U.S. government expected. Those are tough people over there. Speaking of Algeria, apparently they're refusing to join this Saudi-led Muslim military alliance. Saudi Arabia is trying to glue together this coalition of the Muslim nations with which to go after Iran and so forth and so on. But Algeria has now joined Iran, Syria, and Iraq in saying, we want no part of this. And so this coalition may be fragmenting before it even gets going. Now, apparently, one of the newspapers quoted retired Algerian Colonel Abdul Hamid al-Sharif as saying, the alliance is an alliance of aggression, yes, it is, that represents the conflicts of interest raging in the region, and Algeria refuses to be part of it. So there are some calm heads over there in the Middle East who understand it could be a flashpoint that really gets World War III going. There are so many of them, the Middle East, North Korea. Now, you remember a while back, one of the few things that Obama did that I agreed with is he started to normalize relations with Cuba. And I'm not just saying that because I was looking forward to Cuban rum and Cuban cigars. Basically, the reason that we had the Cuban Missile Crisis is that after Castro's revolution, Castro approached the United States about establishing normal relations and trade. And the American corporations said, the only way we'll establish trade with you is if you give us the same discounts that Batista was, which is what had impoverished the Cuban people, and Castro couldn't do that. So the U.S. basically declared the blockade, which went on way, way too long, just to prove that the U.S. government can carry a grudge. And that was what forced Castro to form an alliance with the Soviet Union. And knowing that we are on a path to a new global war, it made sense to me. Let's make friends with Cuba so that Russia doesn't have that foothold in our hemisphere. To me, that makes perfect sense. But apparently, ever since Trump won the election, they're out there trying to make stink face at Cuba and go back to the days of the blockade. And I think they're making a critical mistake here. And you remember a while ago, there were these claims coming from the U.S. that the Cubans were using a sonic weapon on our ambassadors, which nobody could actually prove, and Cuba is denying it. Well, the new spin is the Russians were in Cuba doing this. Russia gets the blame for everything. Car overheats, got to be Russia. Your mail gets lost, it was Russia. They're ripping off the mailboxes. It's raining today, oh, Russia's weather satellites. Everything bad that happens. Lost your car keys, Russia did it. Russia's done everything, except Russian dressing, which, as it turns out, is actually an American invention. So let us talk now about the economy. We're now in the Christmas shopping season, and they're trying to flog us as hard as possible to max out those credit cards and buy a bunch of stuff that probably in any other time of the year we'd look at and say, this is silly. And I saw one earlier today. Apparently it is the new generation of the pet rock, only this one comes with a stitched leather holster. $85, already sold out. And you have to wonder, what are people thinking in this day and age with this economy? In any event, consumer debt is already up $605 billion. It's estimated this holiday shopping season, if it goes the way the retailers are praying that it will be another $600 billion spent on Christmas. Now, we need to be very careful because we're getting a lot of reports that, yes, people are out there, they're shopping, they're buying like crazy. But every Christmas for the last 6, the Christmas season starts out with all of these announcements in the corporate media that, oh, people are swarming to the stores. They're buying stuff like crazy. You better hurry. You're going to miss the bargain. You're going to miss that opportunity. And then we get after Christmas, and the numbers really come on out, and we find out that, no, people weren't really doing all that much spending after all. It's just another way to get you to go down to that mall and whip out the plastic. That's all it is. Now, household debt is really getting out of control, and the reason is higher prices, higher rents, lower salaries and wages. People are actually having to use their credit cards to live on, and that is really a trap. And so we have this article out of Zero Hedge that even while the stock market continues to soar into the stratosphere, one record high after the next, and it's all an illusion. Apparently, household debt is so bad, it's forcing a lot of New Yorkers to rely on food pantries. This is an article in the New York Post. They're having to go to the food pantries to have enough to eat. This is not an economic recovery. This is an economy that is in stagnation. This is an economy that is trembling at the edge of collapse. And still, they're siphoning all the money out of the country to spend on more wars. And remember, in a war, the country that runs out of money first loses. Story out of Blacklisted News. Morgan Stanley, with a long rap sheet of corporate crimes, says that Jeremy Corbyn holding them to account would hurt them worse than the worst Brexit. Oh, we would suffer. We bankers would suffer. You can't hold us to account for our crimes. And they seem to get away with it. Because when they get caught, there'll be a settlement, which comes off the bankers' taxes and increased fees to their customers. The banking executives never go to jail. They never have to do a payout out of their own personal pocket. And they've gotten arrogant in their status. That's what this article shows. Morgan Stanley is out there saying, don't prosecute us for our crimes, it would cause us hardships. What's that slogan they have over on the cops' reality TV show, don't do the crime if you can't do the time. I think that applies here. Tony Blair is out there becoming the new star of The Remainers, and he's telling French Britons will change their mind. And the UK is already turning around. They're regretting having voted for Brexit. They're already talking about trying to have a second election, which they'll work that much harder to try and steal, because there was massive election fraud in that Brexit election, all against Brexit. Just like there was massive election fraud in this country last year, all of it against Donald Trump. But Trump won, and so did Brexit. Deal with it. Now, apparently, private companies are getting ready to cash in as Homeland Security brings facial recognition to the U.S. borders. And it's a big business. It's becoming another complex because facial recognition has not been shown to be 100% reliable. And look at the disaster with the iPhone 10. And yet they're spending huge amounts of money on it. A lot of the stuff Homeland Security has bought throughout the years has turned out to not be reliable. It's possible to get things through those scanners. The swipes get false positive. There's a little cloth that they wipe over your luggage to see if you're carrying drugs or explosives. They get false positives. If you had turnips for dinner last night, you may get a positive for heroin that's completely bogus. But it's big business, and the money is driving the cycle. Now, a little bit of good news here. Apparently, the Bundys, Cliven, Ammon Bundy, and Ryan Payne, have all been given pre-trial release. This was very upsetting to the prosecutors who tried to portray them as a clear danger to the community and risk of flight. But they're out free now. At one point, Clive Bundy said he was going to stay on principle, but last I heard, they're all out. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to take a phone call from Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha, Kevin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. All these sexual allegations, it kind of reminds me of the J'accuse. With the French Revolution and the guillotines start flying.
Yes.
I don't know if you catch my parallel. But, we had due process in this country. I mean, just accusing someone means you're guilty. I've seen nobody go to court, and I'm not trying to defend anyone, but I'm questioning the due process.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Now, people like to call it the Napoleonic Code, but you're absolutely correct. This goes back even before the French Revolution, where the presumption was if you were accused, you were guilty, and the burden was on you to prove that you were innocent. And we're supposed to have an opposite system in this country. And that's why I've been saying we have to be very cautious with these allegations. Now, in the case of Matt Lauer, he's admitted that some of the things he's accused of actually did happen. And but again, an allegation is not a fact; it's not proof, and we should be a little bit cautious because it does seem to be blowing up into the new fad. And it does remind me a lot of the rape hysteria back in the 1990s with the militant feminists, where, everybody wanted to be a victim because they could get on TV. There were even T-shirts that said potential rape victim that women were buying and wearing. It's almost like they were advertising to get attacked. But these mass movements can get going and then spinning out of control. This one definitely has. Now, for those who've really committed these crimes, let's give them a nice public tarring and feathering, but let's not ruin innocent lives, just getting caught up in the hysteria here.
Yeah, I totally agree. It just seems like all the strides that we've taken forward, we're taking 100 back. I agree with you on, I'm going to say 75% of the time. Dustin from New Jersey, absolutely genius. I agree with him about the same amount of times, 75% about the time, what you guys have to say. It's not here, debating isn't the issue. It's going to solutions and talking about solutions. And what we're facing is, in retrospect, I feel like we've been hijacked, or the freedom or liberty revolution has been hijacked with like this French Revolution, like a French Revolution 2.0. I don't know how we're going to face this. I feel like, the purging of everybody in the media is getting row of one set of shark teeth, and then the new row of shark teeth is getting ready to emerge. And I have a feeling it's going to be your quasi-liberty people, and I think they're going to start trying to have us infight with amongst ourselves.
Oh, they've been trying that for a very long time. They're always trying to stir up trouble between the various independent media hosts, and I refuse to bite because now's not the time for us to be playing that way. We all have to work together if we're going to head off this war and try and get the country back to a true republic. Kevin, we're going to have to let you go. We got to do a station identification, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I got to tell you, I'm just really enjoying how smoothly all of this is working now that we got rid of Skype. And yes, we're not getting the proper bandwidth from Spectrum that we should. But as was pointed out to me before we made the switchover, BAMuser got out just fine. Everything else was working. Just this Skype on this machine, Microsoft really messed it up. And maybe their focus is on Skype for iPhones and tablets because those appear to work really well, and we do use them. And maybe they're just sort of moving away from the desktop because the future model is handheld portable terminals, and all of your data and software is in the cloud. Now then, interesting little story. This is from Fox News, Brett Baer, talking about how the rate of fake hate crimes has hit an all-time high. And there have been a lot of fake hate crimes. But generally people weren't suspicious when they saw a hate crime. It had to actually be documented, yes, this person did the damage to themselves. There have been some very famous ones, like the Tawana Brawley rape hoax. But now people are becoming skeptical. And when they see a hate crime, they don't leap to the conclusion it must be real, oh, it's horrific, somebody must do something. They're suspicious, they're skeptical, and they ought to be. Because according to this Fox News report, it is an unpleasant reality. A lot of these hate crimes are actual hoaxes for political gain, or just for attention. Just for attention. Now, House Speaker Charles McCall and Representative Josh Cockcroft have announced the House Special Investigations Committee has created a whistleblower hotline for state employees to anonymously and confidentially provide allegations of waste, abuse, and fraud taking place in state agencies. I hope that phone line has multiple lines because there's a lot of it out there. And for those of you who've got something to whistleblow, the hotline number is 405-962-7890, and it's also on the main page of whatreallyhappened.com, so you can go find it. But there is a lot of fraud and waste. Here in Hawaii, there's almost a fist fight going on over this idea that it's time to audit our light rail project, which is years behind schedule, billions of dollars over budget, nowhere near completed yet. And everybody's saying, where did all the money go? And there's a citizens group that is saying there should be an audit given that this is all public money. And the people behind the light rail project are saying, we don't need an audit. I mean, that's like asking to audit the Federal Reserve. I mean, you guys got to be just silly out there. We posted a couple of articles on what really happened, some flashback articles about some of the ridiculous things that police are buying with civil forfeiture money. Remember when John Oliver took that issue on Next Week Tonight? It was a great segment. It's a great segment. So there's a lot of corruption out there. Somebody has to be willing to do something about it. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. Don in Iowa, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, yes, I heard a snippet from Bernie Sanders, and he said, he was talking about this tax cut. He said as soon as this tax cut's going to put us farther into debt by 1.7 trillion, I think is what he said. And as soon as this passes, the same guys are going to be saying, oh, we're in debt, we're going to have to get money out of Social Security and Medicaid. He's right. They've been wanting to dip their hands into Social Security for years. They keep trying.
They already did that back when Bill Clinton was president. He plundered the Social Security Trust Fund for all the cash that was set aside for the baby boomers, and he replaced them with a special Treasury bond so he could say it was just a loan, but the government can't make good on those bonds now. If you really think about it, the U.S. government, along with embezzling the American workers' cash in the first place, has now defaulted on the American worker. And everybody is saying Social Security is going to go cash negative any time now as more baby boomers retire, and fewer Americans are working to pay into the system. At this point, unless they're willing to do something dramatic, like simply shut down the Federal Reserve and write off that debt, there's no way to save the situation. It's already gone hopelessly beyond any point of reasonable possibility of return. There's no repair for it. When you're taking all the wealth out of the ordinary people, you're piling it all over large corporations and rich individuals and spending huge amounts on war. There's obviously a point where it's all going to fall apart, and it doesn't matter how many printing presses you've got and how many zeros you hit on that computer keyboard, because you devalue the dollar to the point where it won't buy anything anyway. Look what happened in Zimbabwe. People were walking around with paper notes that said $100 trillion, and they were worth about 12 cents American, and now you can buy them on eBay as curiosity.
Right, people are buying Bitcoin too, including Zimbabweans. They say they're buying Bitcoin because a lot of Africans, because they can't. It's not as bad as their money. But anyway, as far as Bernie, he should be president right now. Bernie Sanders.
I agree.
One thing Hillary
I have to be very. Sorry to cut you off here, but I have to be very honest. If Bernie had won the Democratic primary, I probably would have supported him, if for no other reason than Trump was an amateur and naive coming into Washington, D.C. politics. But Hillary stole the primary from him, tried to steal the presidency from Trump, and failed. And basically, we have not seen any significant change in the economic or military policies of this country.
Bernie would have beat Trump.
I think he might have.
Oh yeah, he would. He was running ahead in the polls and everything, and the only reason Hillary lost is because she's so horrible, you know.
Well,
he should be the president.
When it was obvious that Hillary had stolen the primary, stolen the nomination, it alienated a lot of Democratic voters, and they crossed over and voted for Trump.
Yeah, I did. I'm now a Republican. But if Bernie runs again in 2 years, I'm probably going to vote for him. It looks like he's going to run again.
Yeah, but he may be running against Hillary again, and that means another stolen primary.
I don't think Hillary's going to keep at it. She wants to keep her face in there.
Unless she gets convicted of a felony, which would bar her from holding office, the way she's acting right now, going out on the book tours, keeping herself in the public eye, she's not acting like somebody who's really retiring from public life. She's acting like somebody who's already starting to think about 2020.
Right, well, she's thinking about it, but I think it's not going to work for her. But we'll see what happens. I'll let you go, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. I mean, I certainly hope that you're right. I certainly hope that you're right and Hillary doesn't run, but my gut is telling me that, barring conviction for a felony or an asteroid falling on her, that, she's going to be a factor in the 2020 elections. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, the United States Supreme Court has taken up the case regarding warrantless collection of cell phone records. And this is probably the most important Fourth Amendment battle of the digital age. And so they're going to be looking at this case involving law enforcement accessing cell phone records without a warrant. Now, unfortunately, Canada just set their own precedent, and they went ahead and said, yes, in point of fact, the police can look at cell phone data and records without a warrant, including anybody who's just in the area of the network. So that sets a bad precedent there. Let's see. I'm getting, okay, been a quake up at Chesapeake Bay. I have a lot of information just coming on in here. So let's see. Let's talk about human-caused global warming. Winter is really beginning to settle on in. Much of France is getting their first heavy snow of the season, with 50 departments placed on alert for snow and ice. And it's expected to hit much of France, with the National Weather Agency, Météo France, placing 50 departments on yellow alert. That's the third highest warning level, meaning traffic hazards, take extra precautions, and drivers are warned to be particularly vigilant. And it is snowing here in Hawaii. I know a lot of people find it very weird to think about snow in Hawaii, but we actually do get it up on the tops of the volcanoes on the Big Island, and it's starting to snow there. It also snows on Haleakala, which is on Maui, but it's a heavy snow, and it has been getting heavier over the last few years. But they're still out there pushing this global warming, climate change agenda by any means that they can. And the Moody's credit rating agency is now warning cities from Maine to California, saying that if they don't start preparing for climate change, their credit ratings will be lowered, which means they won't have access to cheap credit. It's a financial coercion. Start doing what needs to be done to deal with climate change. And ultimately, the agenda about human-caused global warming or climate change is not about global warming or climate change. It's about having more control over your life, about allowing some global environmental authority to decide for you how you're going to live. And a lot of this is inside Agenda 30. Used to be Agenda 21, but they fell behind on the schedule, where they're saying that the living standards of everybody on Earth need to be driven down. Now, for much of the Earth, people are already there. So this policy is directed at those industrialized modern nations where the people have worked to build a culture, a civilization, an economy, and enjoy the fruits thereof. And now the global warming people want to come on in and say, well, we don't think you should have the benefits of the life that you've built. We think you ought to go back to living in little tiny shacks and cooking your food over flaming cow poo or something like that. Because resources on Earth are finite, they always have been, and the money junkies want more. And that means you must have less. And that's been the message we get from the money junkies all along. You must make do with less so we can have more. That's the way they think. We're going to take another phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi. Mike, I got to talk about this whole Dow at 24,000 going to 30,000. We got the growth is amazing. We got 3.3% growth. Where are you getting these numbers from? Because, like, do you notice since Trump's been in, he didn't do anything with the economy. You know, like, all of a sudden they got all this growth, but yeah, you watched Tucker Carlson last night with that gentleman who has that book out with all the homeless camps popping up all over the country, and I'm like, what are these people talking about? You know, like the growth. There's no growth. There is none. It's a fraud.
Well, it depends on how you define growth, because under private central banking, when they say the economy is growing, it means the total aggregate debt is increasing, which of course will generate more in interest revenue for the bankers. But they use the word growth to make it sound like it's a positive thing, but it isn't, not really. And as far as some of these other indicators for the economy that we're getting from Wall Street and Washington, D.C., we already know that a lot of them are just made up. We know that our real unemployment is not 4%. We have almost 100 million American citizens willing and able to work who have not been able to find a job for months and in some cases years. And so our real unemployment rate is hovering around 30%, which is even worse than the Depression of the 1930s. So as far as the rates of inflation, we already know that they do not include fuel and food in that calculation, these being the two areas where inflationary pressures start to show up first. So it's all just being made up to reassure us, to get us to sit still and not get angry with the government, not get angry with the bankers, get on out to those shopping malls and max out the plastic, because good times are ahead and you'll be able to pay back those credit card bills in just a few months of 2018.
This the Roaring '20s sentiment again, you know, like happy days, you know, like the whole Roaring '20s, and all of a sudden, kaplooey. You know, those people who made their money, the ones who propped up the stock market, you know, the corporations, and then all the regular people who got like 401ks are all going to get crushed, you know, like, and their lives are going to be miserable,
yes,
you know, and then you'll have more crime, and, you know, it's like a revolve. It's just like a circle, vicious circle. It's just amazing. Sean Hannity was pushing, you know, about the tax plan and all that. Whoever writes the tax plan benefits from the tax plan. The average American is not writing the tax plan. Goldman Sachs is, so they'll benefit. You won't, you know, because I talked about this before, you know, dropping the corporate tax rate's not going to build up anything here. I mean,
no. This is a resell of the trickle-down theory, that if we let the rich have more money, that they will, out of the kindness of their heart, allow some of it to trickle down onto the rest of us. Well, don't trickle on me and tell me that it's rain. What they're basically talking about is a system where all of the food is at the table of the ultra-rich, and if they happen to drop a crumb, you should be grateful for it. But the reality is, and we had a discussion about this a while back, lowering corporate tax rates is not going to improve the economy in this country, because of the decline of manufacturing, the closing of our factories, Common Core education, and the crumbling infrastructure. There really isn't much for a corporation to work with here to start a new business. They're going to take that money, they're going to go put it into businesses in foreign countries.
Yeah, Mike, I looked at how much Germany, you get $26 an hour working on, you know, manufacturing cars. And over here it's like 23 or something like that. And in Mexico it's $3, and in China it's $5. So I'm like, those companies are not coming back, even with the 20%, you know, corporate, you know, plus all the loopholes that come with because remember, they're not being forced to you know, with the corporate tax rate getting dropped to 20, there's no strings attached. They don't have to do anything. You know, like, I don't understand, like, how anybody can want this tax plan. You know,
you said it yourself, the money junkies want it. The rich are definitely going to get richer. And they've already backed off this claim that the middle class will see a tax cut. And they're admitting, yeah, taxes are going to increase on the middle class, driving the middle class down to the lower class. And that is by design. Because anytime you have a tyrannical government, they don't like a middle class, because the middle class is where opposition to oligarchy will arise. And the French did it before the revolution. The Soviet Union literally designed an entire social system that designed out a middle class right from the very, very beginning. And we've seen the middle class under attack in this country for decades. And it's not going to turn around while we have the same policies continuing. The worst being, of course, that private central banking model.
Yeah, it's the same people in there. They outsourced their jobs in the first place. That's the funny thing. Well, not funny, but they outsourced the jobs in the first place.
Well,
they don't care.
They don't. But we have to take a break for commercials. And Dustin,
thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And grab your paper and pencil here, because if you want to help out Republic Broadcasting, and we need your help, the postal address to send a donation is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. And the phone number, if you want to phone in a donation with a credit card or a debit card or something, is 800-724-2719, extension 03. We're just now getting word there was a 4.4 earthquake near Dover in Delaware. Now, 4.4 isn't all that big, but Delaware does not have a history of seismic activity. But yes, they have fracking, and apparently there is a fracking ban being considered by their legislature. Maybe a little bit too late. Remember, before fracking, Oklahoma never had earthquakes. Now they're getting dozens and dozens. Let's take some phone calls here. Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, Snack Bar. What's on your mind today?
Hello, aloha to you both, Snack Bar and whatever. As far as the earthquake goes and the fracking in Delaware goes, only thing I can think of is do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. But that's not the reason why I called.
Okay.
In light of the scenario with Matt Lauer and the whole sexual innuendo and who knows what have you and ad nauseum, it dawned on me that didn't he about 2016 or 2015 have the little chat interview with Hillary Clinton about, and then it kind of went off the cuff, as it were, during his little question and answer chat or whatever with her, for that matter, a year or so ago. And I think where I'm hitting at is that if you have a simple acquaintance type of chat, question, answer, chat, or whatever, then chances are, with the Clintons, chances are the most you're probably going to end up suffering with is charges of sexual harassment and having women come out or men coming out the wazoo, out of the woodwork, making accusations of or whatever allegations of, oh, they did this, they did that, and whatever have you. However, if you blow the whistle and they're really a lot closer and blow the whistle, then you end up saying, oh, well, I just signed my death certificate.
Well, in this case, I think the timing rules out revenge, and generally the Clintons don't waste a lot of time getting revenge on people. They want to shut down what they see is an immediate threat. But in this case, as I said, Matt Lauer had a press conference, and he came out and said some of the allegations against him were exaggerated or mischaracterized, but he admitted that some of this stuff really did happen. So I don't think it's as engineered in the case of Matt Lauer as it was in the case of Roy Moore. But certainly a lot of people who are feeling wronged are seeing there's this public climate that is now open to people coming on out and making these allegations. And, of course, back in the 1990s, feminist movement, and even during Hillary's campaign, they were always pushing this idea that when a woman made an allegation like that, she ought to be just believed at face value. But we know that that is a very dangerous course of action because we know that there are people who will lie to get their names in the newspaper, to get revenge on somebody, to get rid of their competitors. And so we have to be very careful, case by case by case. That's the lesson of what happened with Judge Roy Moore, is the fact that it's turned out to be pretty much all a fantasy. And it looks like the voters of Alabama didn't buy into any of it anyway.
Well, you know, what is basically coming from women as far as allegations are concerned, you know, the same could be said for the flip side of the fence, as far as men allegating that they were, you know, assaulted this way, that way, or unwanted this or unwanted that in return from women that they've come in contact with. So it's like, okay, so it's okay for this sex to have make allegations of one thing, but it's a very mixed picture, because if a man goes and makes an allegation of such, generally they're not looked so down upon for that matter. They're basically like, oh wow, you did this or did that, way to go, dude, you know, type of mentality. Whereas a woman is just the opposite. She's basically looked down upon as though she's basically a slut. So,
well, I have to disagree with that because of the common perception that women are a victim class. And I think, hi, America, welcome back to our show here. And we're going to take some more phone calls, starting with Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha, Brendan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, maybe the other shoe dropped on the Clintons over there in Delaware, and that's what that seismic activity was.
Maybe she fell down the stairs again or something. I don't know.
So, hey, first I just want to say you deserve a Medal of Honor for keeping the show on the air through all these trials and tribulations. Well done, my friend, and we all appreciate your efforts.
Well, thank you, but I have to share that, you know, with Mike and Dan and John, because we were all working together to find out, first of all, what the problem was, and then find a way to get around it. And now, of course, because BAM User is shutting down their community streaming service, I'm setting up an alternative system, which so far looks like it's probably going to have better video and audio quality as well.
Well done. I troubleshoot elevators for a living, so I can imagine what you guys are dealing with. Okay, so I called in because I wanted to recommend a video interview with Julian Assange and Amy Goodman, where he just blows her out of the water, and she's trying to pin him down on Roger Stone. And I won't do any justice describing the interview. I just encourage all your fans, and if you could post it on whatreallyhappened.com. It is one of the best interviews, blowing up the whole Russia-Trump narrative. He goes into how Stone is just trolling the media and their heads are spinning. And, you know, please, folks, go watch it because it is so concise, so articulate. And Assange is typically considered a friend of democracy now, and he just flat out told Amy Goodman he is totally irritated with this line of questioning, and he makes her look like a complete fool. And I was a Amy Goodman Democracy Now! Fan for years, and now that I've, taken the red pill, I can see right through all their, editing Trump to say different things. And that was a wake-up for me when they edited a Trump clip saying that he was for, ban on immigration, and they cut it right there. That was a wake-up call for me. So please, folks, go look at that interview, and if you can post it, Mike, do it. And thanks again.
All right, well, you're welcome. I'm looking at the search right now. I'm seeing a multiplicity of videos, so I'm going to have to go through and find that one.
It'll have Roger Stone. Roger Stone will be in the headline or in the link or whatever.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing it yet, but I will make a point of hunting it down, okay?
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you, and we're going to switch over to James in Tokyo. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I'm actually just calling you to make sure that you and Claire were okay after that extremely violent, horrific incident that occurred in Hawaii last week. otherwise known as Black Friday.
Well, we stayed in the house.
Okay.
We barricaded the doors. You know, we had our emergency food and water, and we closed the windows and we hid out.
Great. Hey, your last caller, I think the Russian narrative anyway collapsed. I mean, it's already out that Hillary paid for a dossier, which two of the sources were listed as Kremlin agents for the purpose of trying to change the election. So I think that's already collapsed. Anyway,
I think for the most part you're right, but Mueller's still out there trying to find somebody that he can threaten with jail to get him to turn against Trump. It's just an absolute hatchet job, and he shouldn't be in that job because of his obvious conflicts of interest. And by the way, those two Kremlin sources that were used in Christopher Steele's dodgy dossier turn out to have not had connections with the Kremlin for many years. So they weren't on the inside, and as I was pointing out yesterday, if, in fact, Russia had managed to compromise Donald Trump with a couple of hookers, that would be probably the most closely guarded state secret. Because if it goes on out and Trump gets removed from office, then the entire point of having compromised him in the first place is lost.
Yeah, Mueller is still involved, but they're obviously not going to find anything about Trump and Russia. I mean, they might get something on other people for lying or, forgetting to say something, but I think that's about as far as it's going to go.
Unfortunately not, because what Mueller is going to do is tell these people, I'm going to put you away in jail unless you testify under oath that you saw Trump and Putin swapping wet, sloppy kisses or something. And probably faced with a 20-year jail sentence, people would get up there and lie if it means a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Well, it's interesting. Let's see how it all works out. I have to disagree with Dustin in New Jersey. I might have to send him some extendivite. I'm all for the stock market going to the moon, Alice. I've been in Japan for 27 years, so I never paid into American Social Security, and I've never paid into the Social Security system here, as you have to pay in for 25 years before you get anything, and I never thought I would be here this long. So I have a lot of money invested in American stock market, especially some REITs. I know that you don't like the private prisons, and so when the corporate tax rate does go down, they have to pay out more money to the investors. So for me, it worked out, and I got some real estate. So people have to make their own way. So I'm all for it going up as much as it can, and it personally helps me and my family.
Well,
also, the internet.
Let me insert a comment here. If the underlying value of the stocks was going up at the same time, that would be a good thing. But when the plunge protection team is using market manipulation to drive the prices and indices higher to use as a propaganda tool, then you create a situation of an overvalued market. And if it gets overvalued too much, then any correction that happens is literally going to crash right down into the basement. That's what happened in 1929. And the danger here is our stock market is overvalued, even worse than it was in 1929, because those sky-high stock prices have become almost completely disconnected from the actual value of the underlying stocks.
In my opinion, what you're saying is right, but you also got to take that on a company-by-company basis, because some stocks are overvalued, like a Tesla, and other stocks are, I think, fairly valued. So, like, personally, I just take it on a company-by-company instead of trying to group everything together. About the Internet, you've been having some problems. It's been hard hearing you for the past few days. You said you got some new equipment. I hope it's good. But as far as the Internet, I've also, in my building, have a Internet service that's supposed to give 300 speed for the Internet, but I'm only getting about 95. And so I wanted to upgrade to this new fiber optic they have here, which gives like 1,000 MPS. And but they couldn't do it in my building because they said my building is old and the wiring is not suitable for it. So maybe it's possibly be your wiring. I have 1,000 at my beach house, and I'm getting like 350 up there, but yeah, here I'm only getting 95. So maybe it might just be like the wiring, not exactly the service.
Well,
in your house.
The wiring is an issue in our house in terms of our considering DSL from AT&T, and they're already providing gigabit rates, but again, your phone lines have to be fairly modern so they can carry the additional bandwidth, and ours are not. This place we're living in was built back in the 1970s, and it's still 1970s wiring in the walls. So as far as not getting the bandwidth that you're paying for and is advertised, that really is an issue for like the Trade Commission or somebody to say, why aren't you providing these people? Now, I don't know how the Internet works in your building, but if it's a single cable coming on in and maybe it's being shared by a lot of people, that could drag down the bit rate into the individual units. So that could be an issue if the infrastructure isn't being kept up. Certainly that appears to be the case with Spectrum because they're signing on all these new people and they're not enlarging their capacity at the same time. They're profit-taking, they're putting the money in their pockets for bonuses, or they're writing checks to the stockholders to keep them happy. But much of our infrastructure in this country is crumbling, and the Internet is no exception.
Well, I hope you get it all worked out, and once again, nice talking to you, Mike, and you have a good day and that lovely harp-playing angel. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And, yeah, it looks like we've solved our audio problems for RBN. I'm working on a new replacement for BAM User, which so far looks like it's actually going to be better quality as well. So in the long run, it's going to work on out. You'll get to see my gray hairs and my wrinkles and other defects in much greater clarity and beautiful high def and the rest of it. All right, let's take another phone call. Curtis in Nevada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, Mike, I'd like to continue on this, the issue of the women's harassment thing that seems to have sprung up here. I think we all know, anybody who's paying attention, that this is all part of a long-term agenda to divide and break down American society. We saw them do it with the races. They were successful, with the black incidences with police. And now I think that this is part of it, that they can make it into a gender situation, which would make it a lot more serious.
Well, the problem is some of the allegations coming on out involve homosexuals who are approaching other men. And I think it's only a matter of time before somebody comes on out saying that a woman was the aggressor and made inappropriate demands of a male subordinate. And again, going back to my time in Hollywood, this stuff was going on all the time. In fact, there were 2 occasions when I was working on films, I got hit on by gay stars. Now, at the time, I was single, and we didn't have this climate of, oh, my goodness, it's inappropriate. Actually, in a way, I was kind of flattered that they thought I was that cute, but of course I declined because I'm basically 100% heterosexual. What?
Who was she?
No, I got hit on by 2 male gay stars, and no, I'm not giving out their names because they're good actors.
Oh, you mean like Liberace? No, that's a joke. Anyway, going back to, the thing is that they seem to be trying to eliminate right now the assertive male, like the O'Reillys, and they want to keep the Wolf Blitzers in, and pretty much that's what we see now. Compare that to back in the 60s when you had Huntley and Brinkley, and now look at the transition. It's just, it's clearly, an agenda that. And the thing
I am not so sure. I think they went after Roy Moore, and they got all these women to come forward, and I think basically it backflashed on them. Because now it's come back to hit Conyers and Al Franken, and I don't think that part of it was intended at all. And it's now reached the point where Pelosi has done a 180 on Conyers, says it's time for him to step down. It's a classic case of hoisting with your own petard. They've started something that they cannot control, and it's coming back to hurt them.
Maybe it's the other side that's doing it, Mike, trying to eliminate. If you want to get rid of Judge Roy Moore, we're going to get rid of one of your guys too. You know, maybe this is a war that we don't know about.
I think it could be, but again, the problem with this war is it's a Pyrrhic victory because it's making everybody look bad in the eyes of the voters.
Right, but, you know, my message, the one thing I really want to bring out to people in this country is that in every conquered tribe in history, from a tribe to an empire, the men have always been responsible for their demise. No matter what happens, no matter what they try to do, if we try to accommodate, you know, the women by allowing them to take over, and if we get conquered, who's going to be blamed? It's going to be the men. See what I mean? This is true from a marriage to a tribe to a nation to an empire. The men will always be blamed. You know, that's one thing that, and 80% of the world, or 3/4 of the world, they're not playing this women's thing, empowerment movement.
Well,
it's a false movement.
I hate to play opposing advocate here, but that early model of dominant male and stay-at-home female came out of evolutionary survival because a man's contribution to offspring is measured in minutes, and the woman's is measured in 9 months. And so those hominids who protected the women, kept them safe and secure, allowed the men to go on out and do the work that risked life and limb, they tended to have larger and larger populations as opposed to any other model. So that's the roots of that whole image. That being said, I think there's a lot of areas where men and women are equal in terms of intellect, but men and women are also fundamentally different in their psychology. Doesn't mean one is superior and one is inferior. So, again, you have to take it on a case-by-case basis. The problem gets to be when women are being pushed through political processes into areas where they might not even be interested. And again, going back to the 1990s, there was this feminist movement that said, women can have a career. You should go on out and have a career. And the message was that women should want the career. And that any women who wanted to stay at home and be a housewife and a mother and just take care of the kids during the day was somehow culturally inferior. And a lot of women got shamed into joining the workforce, and then that led to bills for daycare and everything else, plus higher tax rates, and they found themselves trapped. They couldn't go back to the old model.
Well, Mike, what I meant by it's being false is that when you're someone, it tells you that you're equal to this other person, period, and go out there and do it. But the reality is that you're not really, but you think you are. And then the people that you're supposed to be equal to, they're playing along. I mean, if you're a woman and you go into a man's arena and throw your hat in the ring and say, I'm empowered and equal, and I'm going to get in your face, the men are going to comply because of a false doctrine. There are a lot of women that are, empowered legitimately, but most of them are not really. But they're totally so they go out and they...
Okay, Curtis, I'm going to have to cut you off. We've got to take a break for commercials, but I think you're making too sweeping a generalization here. We'll be back with more phone calls. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go right back to the telephones. Sherry in Fredericksburg. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mike. I had another rape thing. I have to stand with Francis there in West Virginia because today it's different than it used to be. Now, like today, the political rivals always get, and whistleblowers always get accused of being, they try to do it to Trump, and they're still trying, even though nothing's been stuck, he hasn't done these things. People have witnessed other than the stuff that was reported. So, but it's very popular also today I think. Kudos always go to the victims. They're always glorifying victims. It's like, their red badge of courage and all this stuff. It wasn't like that back in the 80s and 90s. And after I divorced, the administrator of a hospital came to me and said, "You'd make a good clinical social worker. Work for us until we can find an accredited one, and you can work under a social work consultant." I worked 3 years going to rape crisis counsel intervention classes and doing all kinds of stuff. I learned a ton of stuff. But here is how it was back then in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. There was a governor that was dismissed, you may remember. He was a Texas governor because he said rape is an assault with a friendly weapon, ha, ha, ha. And no one voted for him. I don't know if you remember that. This is the attitude back then. A line
from a movie. I'm trying to remember what the movie was.
Well, he used it. This guy used it.
Well,
he was a governor. Yeah, but there's more. Coaches. I've been watching my son in the 8th grade play with his friend Jimmy. Jimmy broke his arm. The coach is out there saying, "Quit whining. You sound like a girl. You're just a weak-old girl." And I jumped all over that coach. Jimmy had broken his arm. My son's friend had broken his arm, and he was saying, "Get out there and quit acting like a girl," And one other thing I've learned, my friend, 2 other friends of mine have learned, and that no is only as good as the guy you say it to. That is how I've always seen it. If I'm close enough to them, they can give me one swift punch to the jaw. If it's well placed, like that football player hit his wife in the elevator, yes, you're out in an instant. If you have, and it was in Downton Abbey, she didn't see it coming. Bang, pop, you're out, you're down. No is only as good as that guy. If he wants to rape you, he's got the balance on you and he's close enough to you, you're going to be raped, and there's no amount of no that's going to stop it. I took judo. I fought one off. Linda, excuse me for a name, but she took off across the parking lot once and was able to get rid of a guy. Mm-hmm. And then a couple other friends have had propositions. One, and one wound up pregnant, one didn't.
Okay,
so,
Sherry, I have to let you go.
That's my story.
I have to let you go. Station identification, but I'm going to respond to you after we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And before we go back to the phones here, I want to respond to Sherry. Women, I think, should not be victims. And they should take responsibility for their own defense against aggression, whether it's a rapist, a robber, abusive spouse. And you don't need to go on out and work all the years that it takes to get like a black belt to be able to do it. And again, back in the 1990s, when there was this whole rape hysteria, there were martial arts experts who set up systems of training women just in the specific moves they would need to discourage a rapist. And there wasn't that many to it. So, again, I think the problem here is that we're all being convinced we're victims, and that's what makes us victims. Victimhood is made to look attractive in order to make us more dependent on the government and the police authority to take care of us, even though they don't actually do that most of the times. So I fully support men and women having martial arts training, being able to take care of themselves in a crisis situation, for the same reason I support the Second Amendment. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. All right, let's take some phone calls here. Frank in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, I've told you once before, I had a completely different experience with women. Back when I was becoming active with the women, it was, I had to be on the defense. But anyway, I don't dismiss the seriousness of the matter. I mean, I know there's a lot of creeps out there, and I know. I was told once that one thing that worked for one of my family members when she would come up with these problems in an office-type environment was, what would your wife think about this? And that would always just kind of stop them dead in their tracks.
Yes.
She was an executive secretary for many years. So if you're an adult and you're confident and you're sure of yourself, there are ways to fend off most of these things. And I mean, I've been sexually harassed as a man by women and at work, and I just blew it off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, whatever. They get a thrill out of it, a giggle out of it, and I'm like, have your cheap thrill, whatever. But that's not why I called. I wanted to put out there that the guys involved with the book are racing the Liberty.
Yes.
Apparently, they're putting an ad, a full-page ad, in the book section of the New York Times.
Yes.
This coming Sunday, December December the 3rd?
Yes.
Or 4th, whatever it is. But anyway, I find that interesting. If anybody reads the New York Times or knows anybody that does, you might want to bring attention to that.
Well, they're going to be our guest on the show next Wednesday.
Okay. All right. That's all I have.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And let's get Bob in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Dark here. Aloha, Mike. It's already dark here in the mountains of North Carolina in Eastern Time Zone because it's only 6 o'clock, but of course the control freaks got to mess with us all the time. But here's my point. And that's part of the thing, everyone. We're being played. We've been played for a long time. It is a psych operation on all of us. We need to stop doing that. We need to get back to education, talk about the Federal Election Commission. Mike, you're one of the few talk show hosts out there who pushes this, although I have to say I don't necessarily always care for your broadcast manner. But my point is the talk show hosts of this country have missed out and have educated many of the people that they surround themselves with and people who would listen, be your donators, in a sense, they're customers. It's been buy silver, it's been buy bullets, it's been buy weapons, and not invest in those stocks like Smith & Wesson or Zig Zauer or any of those. It has been missing out on the stock market rise of over 200%, and I think it's a shame, and I want to get back to educating people. We need to win. We need to make money. It doesn't matter. We can boycott. You can't get everybody on the same page. But I think we've missed out. Some people have missed out on a great opportunity. For instance, how much does it even cost to run a radio show or a radio station? I hear commercials all the time. Why didn't you guys invest? And are you in Bitcoin? And since you guys are on the forefront of information, why aren't you investing in the stock market and putting out information, or at least doing it yourself? And are you?
We're investing our money in the equipment that it takes to run this radio show. I mean, just in the last month. Just in the last month alone, I've bought a new audio mixer, 2 new laptops, and a new desk telephone, and a bunch of other stuff as well. So that's where I'm investing.
I can do it on YouTube.
It still takes equipment to connect to YouTube. And here's the point. Not everybody is driven by the desire to just make a ton of money. My priorities in life are...
But you're asking for money,
Would you stop, please, cutting me off?
Go ahead.
Okay.
You got 3 hours. I got 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, Bob. Not everybody is driven...
I know. You're going to let me go. Mike?
Okay, Bob, we're going to let you go here. My comment to that is not everybody is a money junkie. Not everybody sees getting richer as the end-all and be-all of their existence. Some people want to be fine artists or great musicians, like Claire. Some people want to push the forefronts of science. Some of us want to stop World War III. And so we don't have the time left over to get involved in looking at the stock markets and looking for the next opportunity. If we'd bought in at the bottom of Bitcoin and sold out now before the collapse, same thing with the stock market, we'd come out looking pretty good. But don't have the surplus cash for investment, and don't really have the interest is what it comes down to. Okay, let's go back to the phones here. Charlie in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
couple of things, Mike. First of all, the stock market is just a sophisticated hush money. Most of this money is invested from people that are over 55. Every 2 weeks, the money goes in from the 401k withholding, and you're only getting 0.5% at the bank, so it has nowhere to go but up. It's sophisticated hush money. When they have an agenda, and when they get to their agenda and they reach their goal, this market will disappear just like it did a number of other times. As far as what was I going to say next?
Well, let me respond to what you just said while you collect your thoughts here. Part of the problem right now with these sky-high stock market numbers is what we're seeing is not genuine investment by ordinary people or even by financial institutions. We're seeing these high-frequency computerized trading systems trading back and forth, and that's what's driving up the price of the stocks. But as I said to that earlier caller, it's not dragging up the underlying value as well. Now, the way the stock market was supposed to work, it actually began with real livestock, where you would invest money in somebody's cattle or horses, and when they were sold off or harvested, you would get part of that return. And the idea is you were in there for the duration of the investment, usually a growing season. And most wise investors understand, don't pay attention to that daily up and down. You're there for the long-term increase in the value of the stock rather than trying to pump and dump it, because that volatility increases the risk of there being a collapse. And in a heavily overvalued market, when it starts to correct, the first people out will get their money, and they'll do very well. They're going to be the insiders who know it's coming. And everybody else is going to be left with nothing but a very impressive-looking number on the bottom of their last broker statement.
Okay, on the issue of distractions.
Yes.
This stuff's been going on in Hollywood for generations, and I think we're in a distraction mode because they want to get net neutrality passed and corporate tax cuts. Now, net neutrality was voted on in 2008 by the Congress. And every congressman in Texas, there's 35 of them, voted against it, and that tells me that's not good for the common person when all the congressmen in Texas are voting against it. But look at this tax cut is a hoax. It's to get the corporate tax down where it's permanent. It can't be raised, and you're going to lose your property tax deduction, your state and local deductions. You're going to be paying more in taxes on this. Have you ever been told? Have they ever told you the truth?
No, of course not.
If you're listening to this, ask yourself, have you ever been told the truth under these issues? Thanks for taking my call.
Oh, you got it. And you're absolutely right. When the new tax plan is put on in, it's going to raise taxes on the middle class and lower taxes on the rich. That's what they are always doing. And there won't be a benefit to ordinary Americans because, as I said before, our nation has deteriorated in its infrastructure, in its factories, in its education. There isn't that much here to work with to start a new industry. And that's why these corporations are going to take their tax cut and either put it in their pocket or they're going to take it to another country. This is one of the reasons why I'm in agreement with revitalizing America's space program, pull it away from supporting the global warming hoax and actually get on back to exploring the universe, to going to Mars and the rest of it. Not because I'm interested in seeing the flag planted on all the bodies in the solar system, but because the tech boom of the 70s, 80s, and 90s and all that wealth and all the jobs that were created from that was all born in the Apollo moon program, which in solving the problems of getting to the moon and getting back invented new materials, new manufacturing, new electronics like integrated circuits, and that just spawned all these new industries and new products. And we've got to do that again. We need a peacetime technology incubator because the military, they hang on to their technologies. By the time they finally declassify it, it's utterly worthless. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining the network, and we're going to go back to the phones. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I'm so glad you're sorting out those technical problems, man. It was having me worried for a while.
It was a headache.
Hey, Mike, I was have been in the past an HR director for 3 household name companies. And I have found, and after having my department have personally handled scores, and my department's handling hundreds of sexual harassment cases, that something on the order of about 60% of them are pretty much as complained and true. About 40% of the generally these are the women making the allegations, are not true or not true as they said. Yes. And you could also, and it was discernible enough in the frequency of these things that you could line it up depending on the company's employee evaluation, their performance evaluations given either annually or semi-annually. And either right before or right after, there would always be a spike in both sexual harassment complaints, as people were given their evaluations, they didn't like them, or perhaps they were given progressive discipline, and as a defense mechanism, they would make the allegations. And it was to the point where I would always authorize overtime hours for the clerical people in the department to handle the extra complaints, because when there's got a couple thousand, that works out to be a lot, and even authorized temporary people. The other thing was they would also have stress claims. So whenever that's always been a defense mechanism, and a pretty convenient one. And I've also seen people gang up, several different women, and falsely, it's been found to be falsely alleged that one witnessed another being harassed and all that. I've seen that happen. It happens quite a bit. Not to discount the fact that there are a lot of Harvey Weinsteins out there too. Yeah. There's nobody should have to put up with that. But women are taking advantage of this and have been for a while. And it's getting to be like McCarthyism, just like you can shout at somebody as being a Russian sympathizer now, but it's the same thing with sexual harassment. And no group should be able to use their sexuality to ruin somebody without any jurisprudence of any kind.
Well, let's draw a line there, because obviously what Harvey Weinstein did definitely qualifies as sexual assault, sexual harassment. My concern is, in the current witch hunt hysteria, that the line between genuine sexual harassment and simple flirtation has shifted. Again, going back to my experience in Germany, over there, if the women in your office, they expected to be flirted with, not assaulted, but flirted with, told that they're beautiful, admire their jewelry and everything, and a little touch here and there. And if you didn't, your paperwork was going to vanish mysteriously. They would be very upset. They would feel that you weren't paying enough attention to them. So these things are very often driven by fashion. And under the militant feminist agenda, that line is being shifted so that things that used to be considered simple flirtation are now considered assault. Oh, let's wreck his career. You've got to be very, very careful about it. People are naturally attracted to each other. Doesn't always lead to an outright assault or a rape, but do we really want to have a culture in which people are paralyzed, afraid of what they're going to say or do will be misinterpreted and end their career? We're seeing the entire culture paralyzed by political correctness in general, and now we're seeing interpersonal relationships being severely hampered by this hysteria over flirtation.
Mike, there's a cultural difference, as you alluded to, about Europe and so on. Let me give you a vignette that happened. We used to do consulting work for Japanese companies that had expatriate executives in the United States, and we would train them in American HR law and American mores and the cultural difference, because in Japan, it's an accepted fact of life in the workplace for women that they're going to get groped. Yep. That happens all the time in Japan.
We actually had that happen here when I was working on Final Fantasy, and there was an incident, and it was resolved. They put the whole production company through this training about, what is appropriate and inappropriate behavior in the state of Hawaii.
Well, I can tell you a 30-second story that's pretty funny. And we had a very famous company give us a call. They had a division, in Southern California, and there had just been an incident where a manager, a Japanese expatriate manager, had actually slapped a U.S. Female employee. They called this consulting group that I was with, and we sent some people down with a Japanese interpreter, and I was one of the people that went down. We went up and talked to the president of this division, who was obviously also a Japanese expatriate, and explained him. We said, separate the people, get the story, non-disclosure agreements and all that kind of stuff. And this Japanese president of this division was so upset that he jumped up from his chair, ran down 3 or 4 flights of stairs, went in to this male manager who had slapped the woman, and he slapped the guy. That's a true story.
No, I believe it. I believe it. Because, obviously this action caused the company and the manager to lose face, and face is very important to the Japanese culture.
But that goes to show you just how differently workplaces are, as you alluded to with your European outlets. But it's amazing to me that now we can have people like this whole Russian thing, which has all been about nothing, and they can shout the stuff. There has been a firing of a non-hiring of a coach for Tennessee. Did you hear that one? But because he had worked at any rate, where social media or people make accusations without anything at all, and it's enough to ruin somebody's career.
Yeah, we do have to be careful because the reality is not all these allegations are true. Anyway, listen, we're going to have to let you go. We'll be right back with a few more phone calls. The lines are loaded up here. America, welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones. Debbie in Ohio. Aloha, Debbie. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I know there's 2 phone calls to you concerning the stock market. They're living in an unreal world. I'm sorry, I have difficulty talking. My husband and I live all our life in New Hampshire.
Good for you.
Near Vermont, yeah. So the Grand Estate is my home. I love it. But we moved to Ohio because of the cost of living.
Yes.
Now, I'll tell you, and the man in the mountain does not live there anymore. He's destroyed. So I know New Hampshire. But Ohio is a beautiful place. But my husband lost 3 jobs. They all went to China. I don't know where these people are coming from, but we tried to survive. And a lot of people I know did the same thing. And good for them, they have stock. But the country is falling apart. Totally falling apart. I look around here and stores are closing. People could be giving coupons to go into the store, free money to go and buy something. I mean, that's how bad it is around here. And it's beautiful. You believe me. The soil is really rich and it's green and lovely place to live. But the economy is not good. And these people, if you think they're going to be part of the rich crowd, good luck, because it doesn't exist for the baby boomers who struggled to pay and save and do what they were told to do. We've been scammed by our government, and I have no words for what these people are saying to you, because we listen to you faithfully every night, and we love your program, and we know your news is the real news. And I don't see how the stock market can keep going up and everything can collapse. And we can have wars in every country. Something's going to happen, and it's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know what we went through. And it was really tough.
I know, and when I was very young, my family lived briefly in New Philadelphia, Ohio, so I know how beautiful that country is there as well. But yeah, anybody but looking around with their own eyes, we can see that this is an empire in obvious decline. And the concern is that in its death throes, it may lash out and take a large part of the world with it via the nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm. I know people who are actually working 3 jobs, getting no sleep to pay their bills and barely getting by. So don't tell me there's some. I listened to programs, older past programs, and they talk about some company that existed. It doesn't exist anymore. It's not there. And I'm sorry for these people. I think Trump is doing a disservice to his country by not looking at the middle class and their health care needs and taking care of us, because we are the people that built this country and will build this country in the future. And that's all I have to say. We love your program. I miss New Hampshire, but I'm able to live better in Ohio. So thank you, Michael.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words. And the country that I thought I lived in, the country that certainly I believed in when I was young, it isn't there. It isn't there anymore. And obviously we have not gotten the Donald Trump that we thought we were voting for, because the course of the nation has not changed one bit. And that may be less about Trump betraying his supporters than the belief in Washington, D.C. that the present course is the only one that's still has a chance of working, that they really can't do anything to change this rush to war, that pushing through and conquering the world and looting them for their wealth is the only way for the United States to survive. But at that hideous cost, you have to ask, you know, is a nation that has to predate on the rest of the world to survive worth preserving and protecting? Okay?
No, it isn't. I want to be a gentle country, and I don't see that happening right now. But thank you for all the good.
Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take another phone call from Earl in Calgary. Aloha, Earl. Thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind today?
Hello, Mike. I'm phoning to share someone else's insight as to what is happening with a lot of these high-profile broadcasters being accused and then summarily fired. It's an interesting and maybe an overly simplified thing to say, but they're too expensive. They're in the mainstream media that is dying. And the fact is, they found a way to fire guys just on an innuendo. Our fellow from CBS is perhaps the most recent example.
Well, it's certainly a possibility. The corporate media is in dire financial straits here. The problem is that these people who are being fired could turn around and sue for wrongful termination if it comes on out that there wasn't anything to the allegation. So these media corporations are taking a big risk firing people on the basis of an allegation. That's risk is something they don't like to do.
Lazy. The MSM has got scared and lazy. It used to be called the 45 caliber solution. You would give someone an impossibly large task, feed them nothing but pressure, and not give them the resources, and then be able to fire them for cause, more correctly. The idea here, we've reached a level where this sexual innuendo thing has become such a hobby horse for these guys to ride that they're using it instead of a slightly more focused or legitimate ways of approaching it.
But again, the problem is it's making them all look bad to their audience, and their audience is already in decline. So as you point out, if somebody wants to be gotten rid of before their contract is up, there are other ways to do it. You can just do a straight buyout, or you can find some other reason for termination that doesn't make the entire industry look bad. But with so many of these people being taken down, it's creating a public image of the corporate media and of government that they all are a bunch of slime balls. And that's not good for building your media audience or winning your next election.
Desperate because they're scrambling for nickels and dimes relatively. Therefore, any port in a storm. That's how low the MSM has got in terms of their expectations of their future, their revenue, and whatever, and they're doing absolutely anything that they can do to eliminate overhead, in quotes, $1 million salaries for someone who isn't drawing it the way he was.
But again, if it turns out that one of these fired people is innocent of the allegation, they've got a wrongful termination lawsuit on their hand that could bankrupt a major media corporation.
Did I identify those major corporations as geniuses?
They have a lot of very smart people hired on their law staff. And I'm sure before they make a move like this, they're going to consult with the lawyers. And the lawyer, if he's worth his money, is going to say...
The lawyer has one rule. The lawyer has his own rule. It's universal to the profession. The lawyer gets paid first, so he'll follow any instruction he thinks is half viable. They're not.
I disagree. I disagree because if one of these people,
that's good. That's fine. That's what your forum is about.
Okay. If one of these people again turns out to be completely innocent of the allegations, and there's a wrongful termination lawsuit that drives the company out of business, the lawyer loses his job as well. And the job of the lawyer is to protect the corporate. Would you please not cut me off? I want to make a point here. The job for which that lawyer is being paid for is to protect that corporation and its profitability. And I'm sure if, in some cases, they know the allegations are real, then they've got a just cause. But if they've fired somebody who's actually innocent of any wrongdoing, the backlash is going to cost them far more than they saved with the earlier firings. Okay? All right, Earl, we're going to let you go here. We'll get on back here to the news. And where we left off last time, we were still talking about human-caused global warming. And it turns out there's been a new study funded by the Department of Energy and over at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, two climate scientists, John Christie and Richard McNider, looking at satellite data, found that by removing the climate effects of volcanic eruptions early on in the satellite temperature record, there's virtually no change in the rate of warming since the early 1990s. Now, for the human-caused global warming cult, it wasn't just that the Earth was getting warmer, it's that the warming was accelerating as more carbon dioxide was added to the atmosphere. And these two scientists have come on out and said, well, yes, there's more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Plants are growing taller and bigger and producing more food, but there's no acceleration in the rate of warming. Therefore, the impact of carbon dioxide has been greatly overstated. Now, we're heading into a hard winter, and they're already getting ready to blame Mount Agung's eruption, saying that it's going to cool the Earth this winter, so, go on believing in human-caused global warming. Now, article out of Sputnik News. There's a scientist down in Brazil, Juliano Cesar Silva Neis. He's a physicist at Brazil's University of Campinas, and he's come out with a new theory of the universe where there is no Big Bang. And he says the universe maybe pulsating, getting smaller and then larger and smaller and then larger. And by the way, this is not the first time this has been proposed. But everyone's trying to get away from that idea of the fact that the Big Bang couldn't happen for a variety of reasons, including ones I set forth in my article, The Big Bang is Just Religion Disguised as Science. And so basically this scientist is saying we get away from all the contradictions between the Big Bang and general relativity by not having the Big Bang. But we still have the expanding universe because it's going through these cycles. Now, no mechanism has been suggested for what would reverse a collapsing universe going back on out. But again, I think they need to take that next major step and take a close look at the assumption that the redshift observed in the universe, in the cosmos, is related to relative velocity. Yes, Doppler effects could do it, but so can other things. And all the way back in the 1920s, it was noticed that the redshift in the sky is quantized in discrete intervals. And that would not be possible if Doppler shifts of an expanding universe were the cause of the redshift. But even scientists can get stuck on their pet theories. Go back and look at when it was deemed that the Earth was the center of the universe, going back to Aristotle. They were trying to work out the motions of the planets, and it led to the theory of epicycles, which still holds the all-time record for the longest-running scientific goof in history. And every once in a while, you have to go back and look at those first assumptions. You have to have the courage to go back and say, maybe our prime assumption of an Earth-centered universe is wrong. Maybe our prime assumption that the observed redshift means expansion is wrong. Of course, you start challenging the scientific orthodoxy, you start losing your funding, as anybody who's questioned the orthodox religion of human-caused global warming can tell you. We're going to take a phone call. Jim in Massachusetts, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, aloha, sir. Good to talk to you. Listen whenever I can. I wanted to just stay on one topic. I work in water purification business or industry, if you would, and I really just wanted to call attention to one certain corporation that's really kind of I don't know, just ransacking.
Well, let's not get ourselves in a lawsuit, so you don't say their name.
Well, yeah, it's a giant bottled water corporation. This was a House bill that's trying to be passed in Michigan right now by a representative named Peter Lucido, who's trying to just keep this corporation from taking the municipal water supply for their own needs and assessing a tax of, it's actually very small, 20 million annual state bottled water tax on this certain corporation that, right now takes about 1 billion gallons a year out of California and ships it across the nation in bottles.
Yes.
For profit. And I just really think that this is something that really doesn't get covered as much as it should, because it's a major concern. Water is, of course, very essential, especially in Michigan with the Flint crisis.
Yes.
And it's just really it's kind of abhorrent, really abominable that, this company is able to just kind of come in and raid the water supply while, poor people can't drink water. And really, I don't want to babble on. That's all I have. I also spoke with your producer and would like for, someone I kind of familiar with to be able to maybe be a guest on the show, or you a guest on his show, and if so, maybe he can call me back. I left his name, and I'm not here to show for anybody else.
Okay,
But,
yeah,
great
I see the name here, but one possibility we need to look at is throughout modern history, we have seen this trend where bit by bit, the people's ability to feed and care for themselves is taken away. A couple of hundred years ago, people grew their own food. They had wells on their property. But nobody could make money off of your animals, your property, your water, your food. And so bit by bit, we've been encouraged to move away from the farming lifestyle and become dependent on large corporations to give us our food. And now it looks like they're doing the same thing with the water. There are actually places in this country where you are not allowed to collect rainwater on your own property any longer. And it may well be that the reason our tap water systems are being allowed to deteriorate is to encourage this transition where we are now dependent on a corporation for water, which is essential to life. And next down the road, it'll be air. You don't pay your air bill, they come in and suffocate you.
In a city that I'm close to here, Providence, I couldn't imagine the cost to, kind of. There is actually a gentleman who came up with an invention that kind of goes. What it does is it kind of coats the corrosion from over the years from city pipelines, and that's. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact parts of it, but that's a technology that is becoming an option for cities that if you really look inside
if they have the money. If they have that. See, that's the problem.
Yeah.
There's a lot of technological solutions to problems this country faces. What we have is a political leadership that just doesn't want to spend the money because they're too busy buying bombs, bullets, and bandages.
They need kickbacks, so maybe these companies could start with that. But don't get me started on Rhode Island. But great show. This is one of the best shows on the internet to really get the actual news, and I just really appreciate the job you do, Mike.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words. We're going to let you go and switch over to John in Missouri. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I was wondering what would happen to the values of precious metals and other commodities if there is a reset on the dollar where maybe the rest of the world finds out it's just paper.
Well, the problem with the current monetary systems is that everybody's currency is valued relative to everybody else's. Now, when we had a gold standard or a silver standard, the gold and silver was the measure. Everything was basically calculated in terms of its value in gold. Following Bretton Woods, gold was $34 an ounce until Richard Nixon ended that. But in the event of currency fluctuations, obviously a commodity-based store of value, such as silver, gold, tantalum, platinum, is going to be the most stable. Now, everybody is talking about how the price of gold is going up and down and up and down, but they're thinking in terms of the dollar being an absolute, and it isn't. It's the dollar's value that is changing, not the gold.
Yes, I understand that part, but our money's phony. I guess what you're saying is that everybody's money is phony, so we're all in the same boat? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying that every country with a private central bank, the money is just a fiat issue. It's declared to be of value by the bankers and the government, but it's not tied to anything of value. And that's why countries that try and tie their currency to a commodity of fixed, known, recognized value come under attack. That gold dinar is what got Gaddafi killed, and Libya invaded. And now, of course, everyone's making stink faces. Russia and China are trying to buy up gold and link their currencies to it.
Right. Is that good for us?
No, the fiat currencies are bad for us because we're subject to the whim of the bankers. Now, back when the U.S. dollar was a weight measure of silver contained in a coin, once you had that coin, once you earned it and you stuck it in your pocket, there wasn't anything the government or the banks could do that would change its value. It was under your control. But with the ending of the silver coinage following Kennedy's assassination, the control of the value of the money in your pocket passed to the banks. And they can manipulate it up and down. Certainly with inflation, the value of the money in your pocket is declining. It's like Voldemort is named the chairman of the Fed, and he waves his wand, and real purchasing power that you've already worked and earned, it disappears. And so, yeah, we've lost control over the value of our own money. And now, of course, they're talking about the cashless society, where the banks will simply be in possession of all of the money, and you will have to go beg their lordships for the money that you supposedly earned somewhere to feed yourself and your family and take care of bills. But it will still be all under the control of the banks, which will eliminate the possibility of a run on the bank. And I think that's the main reason they're trying to do that.
If we lose the reserve currency status, what will that do with the precious metals and other commodities, foreign commodities?
It'll drop the U.S. dollar, and that means in the relative sense, the price of gold as denominated in those dollars will go up. And the U.S. dollar is already losing its status as the reserve currency. It's still a reserve currency.
Right.
Anyway, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here, going through the leftover news here. Interesting little story. Headline in Investment Watch blog, is Washington the most corrupt government in history? And my response was, is that a trick question? And I think history has a lesson for us when you look at just how corrupt and borderline psychotic past empires have become. Ancient Rome being a good example. Caligula made his horse a senator. And when you have that much wealth and power and there are no constraints on you, there is no reason that our politicians and business leaders and media elites are not going to allow their baser instincts free rein. And so, yes, I think Washington, D.C. has gone totally corrupt. I don't know that it's the most corrupt government in history because I haven't studied them all, but it's definitely up there, leading the pack somewhere in there. Getting on back to computer stuff, and I'm getting all kinds of emails saying that our audio feed is the best it's ever been, so that worked out well. Apparently, WhatsApp messenger service was down in many countries around the globe, with Europe and both American continents experiencing the worst outages. This is coming from Down Detector. Down Detector is also showing that Spectrum is still having their issues. And we're not getting the service we're paying for. And that's another sign of economic fascism. And the more corporations are allowed to build monopolies, the more abusive they'll become, because there is no competition. And without competition, service will not get better and prices will not go down. A long time ago, when this country was still a republic, we had laws that encouraged competition, because competition made for better products at lower prices. And yeah, the heads of those companies weren't getting filthy, stinking rich, but they were doing okay. I still remember Henry Ford's wisdom that seems lost in our current generation of business leaders. And he said, the best way to become prosperous is to make the community around you prosper. And it's common sense. If your community has got money, there's more of it for you to make selling your cars. But when you live in a country where the money junkies are grabbing everything, and then they stand around scratching their heads wondering why we're not flocking into the shopping malls for the Christmas holidays, you come to understand that they've lost touch with the realities of what it takes to make an economy run. Now, you've probably been aware that a lot of scripts on websites are mining cryptocurrency on your machine, and apparently a new one has been discovered that keeps running even after you close the browser, meaning these cryptocurrency miners are basically stealing your computer time and turning it into their money. All right, we got to stop here. There's the music. Time to call it a day. Get on out of here. Get something useful done. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. He has got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here on our program, share it with everyone that you know. We'll be back tomorrow with the lovely Lady Claire. Aloha, America.